So a friend of mine asked me, are you nervous about starting your new job next week? And all I could think was, I wasn't until you said something. Thanks.
You don't have to be poor anymore. Jesus is here.
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the nearly smoldering fortress of Squalitude, located just outside of Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznutz has figured out I've started recording, and as you can hear, he's desperately trying to get my attention. Aren't ya? Come here. Come here. Stop meowing. Come over. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and he's cat. Get over it. This is going to be a bit of a fucked up episode in addition to being late, I'm afraid. Zandy messaged me last week and very apologetically said that she couldn't do the show right now, so unfortunately I won't be having her on. I can't go into detail as to why she's unable to do it because she's sworn me to secrecy, but if everything goes right, she'll have a pretty big announcement in a couple of months. In the meantime, she's got to focus on other things. She said she felt terribly guilty about this, and I told her not to worry about it. If you follow Zandy on Facebook, you know she does a ton of stuff. She's going to school, she has a job, she volunteers at a women's health clinic, and more. I told her she's done enough with her life so far that if she needs to cut back in some areas, she's more than earned it. So that threw me for a bit of a loop for this episode. I figured that I'd do a news episode and have America co-host with me. I started working on that when America said she had something come up and she wouldn't be able to come on. Fuck. This meant that I had to restructure the episode, so I started working on that. I didn't really like what I'd come up with, but I figured I'd fix it when I woke up yesterday morning. Shortly after I got up that morning, I'm in the bathroom and I hear a pop sound. At first, I think that one of the neighbor kids has hit the house with a soccer ball, as they're often wont to do. Not too long after that, I hear more pops and the lights flicker. I think. Somebody must have hit a pole or something in the light rain we're having. I sit down at the computer and start to work on the episode when I hear the popping noise again. I figure I better investigate. I go looking around the house for what might be causing it, and when I check Nimrod's old room, I see fucking sparks coming out of one of the electrical outlets. The popping noise isn't stopping this time around, and I race to the circuit box and start flipping breakers until the noise quits. Having replaced an outlet or two in this place, I know that they're not particularly well made, and I happen to have a couple that I bought for a project I'd planned on doing but hadn't had the time to accomplish yet, so I figured I'd take the old one out, stick in a new one, and be done with it. Nope. I get the cover off, pull the old one out, and see that not only are the wires burnt in places, but there's a small amount of water in the box surrounding the outlet. Obviously, when I resealed the roof last year, I missed a spot, and that's how the water got in. The damage is so bad that I can't replace the outlet because some of the wires behind the wall are broken. So I have to cut this ugly-ass hole in the wall, find the wires, clip them before the damage, and then, because there's not enough slack in them to rewire the outlet, I have to strip them and put wire nuts on the end of them to be able to turn the power back on. And I kind of need to have the power back on since that bedroom is plugged into the same circuit as the living room where my main PC and modem is plugged in. If I had a car, it wouldn't have been a problem to go to a place like Lowe's and get the things that I needed to do a total repair. But since I don't have a car, Lowe's is like 2 hours away, and I can't haul everything I'd need as I now have to replace an entire wall panel due to the big-ass hole I had to cut. That means I have to use the wire nuts. I thought I had some in the house, but I couldn't find any. So I had to go to the store. Walmart would certainly have them, but that's 40 minutes away. Dollar General, where people too poor to shop at Wally World go, might have them. But if they don't, I'm pretty much screwed, as that means I have to go to Wally World, which is in the opposite direction. Though, now that I think about it, there's a Fred's, which is slightly above Dollar General between here and Wally World, and they might have them. I gamble and go to Dollar General because in addition to doing the podcast, I've got to wash dishes, do my laundry, and make breakfast for today. And lunch, since there's nowhere to eat around my new job. I go to Dollar General. They don't have any wire nuts. Fuck! As I leave, I notice that there's a couple of auto parts stores nearby. I check the first one. Nope, they don't have them. The second one does have them. Yay! By now, it's lunchtime, so I stop off at Crystal's, which is a knockoff of White Castle. I order a slightly unhealthy meal, but because they screw shit up, I get a really unhealthy meal. I could have gotten it fixed, but that would have added to the time it took me to get back home, so I just ate it. I get home and start tearing into things and discover that I'm going to have to cut an even bigger hole in the wall to get to the damaged wires. Joy. I do all that, noticing that there's a nice scorch mark on the inside of the wall, so if I hadn't been home to cut the power, there absolutely would have been a fire sooner or later. Put the wire nuts where they need to go, and then start having an anxiety attack because I just narrowly avoided having my house fucking burned down. I spent the rest of the day just shaking and trying to forget all of that. Even had a stiff drink or two, and I still wound the fuck up over it. Which means this is going to be a bit of a scattershot episode. Okay, I think that's enough complaining on my part about my shit. Now, let me complain about other people's problems. One of my Facebook friends posted this on her status, and it just blew me away because it illustrates how fucked up the healthcare system in America is today. She works for NASA, so that means a good income and good benefits. But even she has had to forego getting some of her prescriptions filled because she can't afford them. This is a woman with an engineering degree, which means she ain't mopping the floors at NASA, and she can't get all her meds. If somebody like her can't afford their meds, what hope do the rest of us have? And while I'm on the subject of American healthcare, let me refer you to this article from Rewire.news. What happens when a Catholic-run clinic comes to your local Walgreens? One of the largest Catholic health systems is set to begin running health clinics inside 27 Walgreens stores in Missouri and Illinois next week. The deal between Walgreens and SSM Health has raised concerns from public interest groups worried that care may be compromised by religious doctrine. You think? Catholic health systems generally follow directives issued by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops that restrict access to an array of services, including abortion care, contraception, tubal ligations, vasectomies, and fertility treatments. We are concerned that the clinics will likewise be required to follow the directives, thereby severely curtailing access to important reproductive health services, information, and referrals. Merger Watch, the National Health Law Program, and the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois and Missouri wrote in a letter to Walgreens on Wednesday. They also sent a letter to SSM Health. In a statement emailed to Rewire, Walgreens said its relationship with SSM Health will not have any impact on any of our current clinic or pharmacy policies and procedures. I want to point out that similar announcements are made when a Catholic organization takes over a hospital. Yet the hospitals soon all stop offering certain procedures that conflict with Catholic doctrine. You know, things like fertility treatments. The Catholic Church is against fertility treatments because it means a guy has to jack off, and that's a sin, even though it should result in a baby being made. Meanwhile, it's perfectly okay for people who can't have children any other way to continue fucking, even though there's no chance of them having kids, outside of God miracling a baby in her belly. That's fucked up. And that's ignoring the fact that they will cut, they will no longer offer things like vasectomies, tubal ligations, IUDs, you name it. And to throw some anecdotal evidence into the mix, one of my now ex-sister-in-laws had a gallbladder attack and went to the ER at a Catholic hospital. At the time, they didn't know it was her gallbladder which was causing the problem. She'd never had a gallbladder attack before and just knew she was in a hell of a lot of pain. The doctors and nurses at the hospital didn't consider any other possibilities for what could be causing her symptoms until after they'd done a pregnancy test. My sister-in-law was on the pill and had apparently been having regular menstrual cycles, so the odds of her being knocked up were pretty low. As I recall, they didn't discover what the problem was. They just gave her some pills and sent her on her way. Now, this could be a case of people not taking a woman's complaint seriously because of latent misogyny, but I'll just point out that a week later, my sister-in-law was in the ER of a different hospital with the same symptoms, and they quickly figured out that it was her gallbladder. The tech who did the ultrasound on her and spotted the issue even apologized, saying, "You should be in the operating room right now." That's how bad it was. For a little positive news, I will let you guys know what my first day at my new job was like. It actually went pretty well. I mean, I can tell it's not something I want to do for the rest of my life, but it's certainly not going to be a bad place to work, and there is potential for me to do other things in the place that I might enjoy more. Not that what I was doing today was awful. We went in, did a little orientation, and then they sent me out on the floor for training. And I was learning how to operate a machine that makes the face shields for surgeons, to keep blood from splattering in their eyes. And interestingly enough, I was looking at the machine and I was like, wow, this is almost identical to a kind of machine called a rolling mill that I'd ran it was 10 years ago. Basically you load in sheets of clear plastic about the thickness of a trash bag that are a little stiffer. They go through a series of rollers, and those rollers cut out the little face shields. And then you just stack them all up, set them down on the table next to you, and the person working with you takes those and packages them all up. And every hour or so you have to swap out a new roll of plastic onto the machine. And of course you've got to adjust it and check the stuff as they come off of it. So not terribly difficult, although I'm going to learn a few more things tomorrow about it because we're going to be switching over to a slightly different setup to run some other parts with the machine. Other shields. But seemed like a nice place to work. The few folks I talked to were fairly friendly. And it's air conditioned, unlike my last job. It also takes me less time to get there than it did to get to my old job. Not much less, but hopefully I'll meet somebody there who lives near here and who can give me a ride, which then it'll be no time at all because this job is only 4 miles away. So we'll see how it goes. Another positive note about the job is that the benefits there are slightly better than the benefits I had at my old job. My old job didn't cover dental. Well, they covered dental, but basically all that was good was the occasional tooth cleaning. This one is slightly better than that, and they have vision, which is something my last job didn't cover at all. So, that's a positive. The other thing that happened was during our orientation, they were talking to us about how they sterilize the things that we produce there. Because we produce bandages for certain types of wounds, after surgeries. We also produce the adhesives that hold, IV lines in place, and things like Breathe Right strips. We do those as well, and other stuff. And they were, all that stuff has to be sterilized, and they do it with gamma radiation. And the guy kept talking about gamma radiation, and he said that he asked a rhetorical question that was something like, and you know the thing about gamma radiation? And I wanted to say, yes, if you're exposed to high levels of it, you turn into the Hulk. But I didn't do that, because I figured that probably wouldn't be a good thing to say on your first day. Be a bit unprofessional. But I was really impressed by the place, because they have roughly the same number of employees as my old job did. But they're far better organized, far more professional. It's run like a business in the 21st century should be ran, at least what I've seen of it so far. Now, I'm sure they've got their problems like every place else, but compared to my last job, they were already well ahead. For example, in my last job, they would just pile up parts in an area, and somebody in that area would pick up the parts and work on them and do whatever they were supposed to do, and then they would take the parts to the next area and just drop them off. There was no record of who did what, and unless you were in certain departments, there was no information about what needed to be done to the parts. So, like in my area, we just had to guess. It's like, well, it's sort of like this thing that we do, and we do this stuff on that thing, and so I'll do it on this, and then you'd have them come up to you and say, no, you're doing it wrong. Or they'd be like, no, we don't need that right now. Work on this other thing. Well, nobody tells you, told you anything. When they brought the parts over, they just set them there, and it's like, well, these parts are here, 2 feet away from me. Those parts over there are 20 feet away from me. I'll do the 2 feet, the ones at the 2 foot mark, because that's probably what needs to be done first. And then they'd come up to you half an hour later and say, why are you doing these? We need those over there done. Tell me this shit. But no. I unfortunately won't get paid for Labor Day, which sucks, because I really need the money. I mean, we all need money, but I really need it. But I don't think it'll hurt me too bad. Okay, this is supposed to be a news episode, so I need to do a little news stories. You'll forgive me for this not being as good as previous episodes because, well, I think you can understand after what I've described. I've gone through this past couple of days, so I'll get you some news here as soon as Fuzznuts can make up his mind what he's going to do.
Everybody needs something to believe in, don't they, Reverend?
Bow down thine ear, O Lord, and hear me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my soul, for I am holy. O thou, my God, save thy servant that trusteth in thee. Save him from this big-mouthed coos with a motor-driven ass who... Forgive me, Lord. I speak not in vain, but this little bitch provokes me so.
Oh, Jesus. At least I can stay in character.
From the New York Daily News.com, we have Hasidic men who beat up gay black victim in Brooklyn attack sentenced to 150 hours of community service. A Brooklyn judge sentenced the two Hasidic men who admitted to participating in the vicious beating of a gay black man to 150 hours of community service on Tuesday. Brooklyn Supreme Court Justice Danny Chun had delayed Pinchas Braver and Abraham Winkler's sentencing by 7 days so they could find an appropriate placement for their community service, but they still have not. Braver's attorney, Robert LaRusso, admitted outside of Brooklyn Supreme Court on Tuesday that it is not difficult to find the right organization. It's not a problem. It's just being able to satisfy the prosecutor that the agency that we are asking the community service to be performed is satisfactory to them, said LaRusso. Now, I just want to... the victim's name is Taj Peterson, And he was beaten so badly by these guys and others in a group of Hasidic men. He was blind. He's now blind in his right eye. They got 150 hours of community service for a hate crime that didn't merely cause temporary injuries to the man. He's permanently blind in one eye. Now, maybe I'm crazy, but it seems to me that if those guys who did the beating were, I don't know, say, Muslim, people would be out for blood. They'd be saying all kinds of shit about how, it's a violent religion, it teaches death, blah, blah, blah. Let's not forget that Leviticus calls for the death of gays. Yet, two Jewish guys, let's not even call them Jewish, they're non-Muslim. Two non-Muslim guys beat the shit out of a gay man, and they get 150 hours of community service. It's fucking bullshit. I mean, I suppose you could see 150 hours of community service if there were no permanent or severe injuries to the victim. But there's permanent injury. Eyes are kind of important. Religion had to have played a part in this. I mean, religion, especially extreme forms of it, tends to teach a hatred of homosexuals. So that certainly gave them justification for their actions. And potentially, it could have played a role in their sentencing. Because they're seen as coming from a good religion and not a bad religion. The truth is, all religion is bad. Yes, some of it is worse than others, but when members of a religious organization commit a hate crime, the punishment shouldn't be weighed based on their religion. And it had to be. I just cannot see how there was any way that they got off with 150 hours without religion being involved. Maybe the judge is homophobic, but why was he homophobic? Well, because God told him that gay people are bad. And I just don't see how anybody could look at this and say, if they'd have been from one of the bad religions, they would have gotten a more severe sentence. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. This next story comes from JoeMyGod.com. And if you haven't seen it, well, you're in for a treat. Louisiana. God destroys Tony Perkins's house. As we are repeatedly instructed, God uses hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and lethal diseases to punish people for sinning. This week, the Lord Almighty aimed his holy wrath at Louisiana, where among the thousands of people made homeless by flooding is hate group leader Tony Perkins, who reports that he had to escape his destroyed home by canoe. Perkins is on vacation this month, but today he called into his own radio show to lament the biblical proportion disaster that will allegedly force his family to live in a camper, the horror, for the 6 months it will take to rebuild his home. Now, I can remember when Katrina happened, people were saying, well, it's God's punishment for gay marriage and taking care of the homosexuals and disrespecting them. And all I could think at the time was, why did Louisiana get hit when you've got San Francisco, which has, I believe, the largest gay population in the U.S., if it's not that, it's one of the highest. You have Las Vegas, well, hell, all of Nevada, where gambling and prostitution are legal. Why have they not been hit by some kind of massive disaster? Yeah, okay, so California's on fire, there's a bit of a drought in Nevada, but, those are the things that you expect. California always burns every year, and Nevada's a fucking desert, so of course it's going to have droughts. Now, if, say, a hurricane were to hit California, specifically targeting a place like San Francisco, then you would have to look at it and say, maybe there is something to this whole wrath of God thing. Or, even better, a hurricane hits Nevada. That's pretty rare. As in, never happens. California can't get hit by a hurricane because the waters off the California coast are too cold right now. I'm sure global warming will change that in the near future. For a hurricane to be able to sustain the necessary winds to destroy, to exist. And I have got to check something. Okay, I looked it up. After Katrina hit Louisiana and continued inland as a tropical storm, it hit Nashville with tropical storm strength. That's just over 500 miles away from New Orleans. Las Vegas, Nevada is also just over 500 miles from the California coast. So, you could have, and that's going by the highways, that's not as the crows fly, so it may actually be shorter. So, if a big enough storm hit California, it could travel all the way across the state and hit Las Vegas. In theory. I realize there's some mountains in between there that might complicate things, but we're talking about a wrathful God here who can drown the entire goddamn planet. I mean, if you want to make a statement to humans that they're fucked up and they're doing shit wrong, you don't hit poor people who tend to be very religious. You smack down the evil sinners. I mean, that's what God did in the Old Testament all the time. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. He nuked them. But did he do it with, has he done it with San Francisco or Las Vegas or California, Nevada? No. I mean, he burns them like he always does. Maybe shakes things up with an earthquake or bakes them in the heat like he always does. You want to get people's attention, you got to do something unusual. Really unusual. In hell, it's God. He could do anything. Make a fucking hurricane form over Las Vegas. That convinced people that, hey, maybe we need to stop doing this crazy shit. But nope. He lets the gambling and the whoring and the drinking go on as usual, while drowning poor people in Louisiana who are devoutly religious overall. And the next story in this segment comes from rightwingwatch.org. Jim Baker, atomic strike wouldn't do any more damage than what abortion has done. Last week, televangelist Jim Baker declared that legal abortion is a sign that we are in the last days, expressing shock that anyone favor abortion rights. Yeah. Bet if Jessica Hahn had gotten pregnant after you raped her, Jim, you'd be more than happy to pay for her to have an abortion. Or wait, maybe he did. To the Googles! No, apparently she did not need to have an abortion after being raped by Jim Baker and who was the other guy involved in that one? Ah, yes. The preacher John Wesley Fletcher. Of course, Baker says he was set up. Yeah, right. Back to the article. My apologies for jumping around like this. People are literally, it's a big thing in the news right now. They're having nervous breakdowns over the political campaign, he said, because there's people who feel so strongly on both sides. Isn't it amazing people are so strong that they want to kill babies that they're fighting for the right to kill babies? He added, if an atomic bomb had dropped on America, it wouldn't do any more damage than what abortion has done. Yeah, actually it would. because there's this little thing known as radiation, which is bad, and there's also the billions of dollars in property damage that an atomic bomb would cause it were one to be dropped. And yes, I know the average number of abortions in America since Roe versus Wade in the 70s has been 100,000 a year. I think. Maybe it's 1 million. I don't remember. It's actually been consistent. It's been fairly consistent. It hasn't increased or decreased. The only thing that's decreased is a woman's ability to access abortion, and, well, that's really it. But, you know, you can't drop a nuke in a vacuum if you're blowing up something in America. So, let's say, I don't know, North Korea managed to lob one over onto the U.S. We're gonna, they hit a major city, New York, Los Angeles. It'd be on the West Coast, so Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Silicon Valley. You'd have millions of people dead. You'd have billions of dollars in property damage. You'd have the radiation that would be there. You'd also have the U.S. retaliating. And of course, if we get nuked, we're going to have to nuke back. And I know people are anti-nuclear and all this, but it's one of those things. Somebody whacks you with a big stick and they're crazy, you got to take them out. Which means whacking them with a bigger stick. The arguments as to how there's a better way to solve it are really immaterial, because that's what's just going to happen, because that's how leaders think. Now, and that's if it, and we nuke North Korea, well, that's going to fuck up shit up. Not only is it going to fuck up North Korea, so there's going to be radiation drifting, all over Asia from that, but it's also going to fuck up the global economy, because no doubt North Korea will retaliate at some, after they launch the nuke at us, they'll start bombing South Korea. A lot of electronics companies based in South Korea, as well as the biggest shipping yard in the world. So, let's say they hit Silicon Valley, and we hit North Korea, and while, our stuff is going over to North Korea, they're also hitting the shipyards in South Korea with even, conventional weapons. You have just totally fucked up the global economy. Not to mention there's going to be all kinds of people running around in a panic and doing crazy shit, and it's just going to get ugly. And we've, depending on, and you're going to have, radiation affecting the sea life, radiation affecting, the food supply, all kinds of nastiness. Abortion only affects a handful of people, depending on circumstances. So, I don't think billions of dollars in damage has been done to the U.S. Well, actually, you figure it'd probably be trillions of dollars, because of things like EMPs, and then, losing the shipyards and the commerce that comes from losing, the global shipping fleet being significantly reduced, and its capacity to replace those lost ships being significantly reduced. I mean, that's going to do trillions of dollars worth of damage to the economy. I can't see how 40 million will hell, we'll round up, we'll say there's 1 million abortions each year, and it's been 50 years since abortion was legalized in the U.S. I don't see how 50 million people could add $1 trillion. And that's a conservative estimate of the damage of a nuke on the U.S. I don't see, there's no way that that 50 million people could add $1 trillion to the economy. None. So, it's bullshit.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
Okay, just one archaeology or story this week. This comes from ScienceAlert.com. A Roman mosaic of an ancient chariot race has been uncovered in Cyprus. This thing is stunning. A rare mosaic dated to the 4th century has been uncovered in Cyprus, the island that sits between the coasts of Syria and Turkey. Decorated in scenes from an ancient chariot race being run inside a hippodrome, an ancient Grecian stadium, the mosaic is the first of its kind ever found in Cyprus and is one of just a few such depictions discovered anywhere in the world. It is an extremely important finding because of the technique and because of the theme. Cyprus's director of the Department of Antiquities, Marina Ieronymiadou, Ieronymmidou, my apologies for butchering her name, told the press earlier this week. And it's 36 feet long and 13 feet high. And they haven't uncovered the whole thing. And the article has some photos of what they've uncovered. It's amazingly beautiful. And the figures in it are about 1/4 the size of a human being. They've got a shot of a guy standing beside it as he's clearing it off, and you can kind of get a perspective of the images. So it's not just merely long and tall. The figures in it are very large. It's amazingly beautiful and incredibly well preserved. I mean, there's obviously some damage to it and colors have faded, but the detail that you can see on the horses is just amazing. They even used tiles to do shading on the horse's flanks. The medieval art in that was done in texts isn't as good as these images in this mosaic. It's just beautiful. You've got to see it. I'll have a link, of course, to it in the show notes.
All systems go. Prepare for countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's off to adventure in the amazing year 400 billion with Commander Horse-headed faithful companion Cadet City as they roam the endless uncharted regions of space at speed so fantastic they level the imagination. Prepare to surge to sublight speed.
This story comes from SpaceDaily.com. Do black holes have a back door? One of the biggest problems when studying black holes is that the laws of physics as we know them cease to apply in their deepest regions. Large quantities of matter and energy concentrate in an infinitely small space, the gravitational singularity, where space-time curves towards infinity and all matter is destroyed. Or is it? A recent study by researchers at the Institute of Corpuscular Physics, what a great name, in Valencia, suggests that matter might in fact survive its foray into these space objects and come out the other side. Wow. Published in the journal Classical and Quantum Gravity, the Valencian physicists proposed considering the singularity as if it were an imperfection in the geometric structure of space-time. And by doing so, they resolved the problem of the infinite space-deforming gravitational pull. So this is, really hugely complicated, but they think that there are wormholes inside a black hole. Now, this doesn't mean we'd be able to use it to get from one point to another because you'd apparently get spaghettified before you got into the black hole, but you'd be reassembled as goo on the other side when you exited it. And I have an exclusive comment from noted physicist Stephen Hawking on what he thinks about the subject.
Whoa, yeah. Come on, yeah. Come on, yeah, I'm a backdoor man.
Perhaps I shouldn't campaign at all. I'll just, I'll write it right into the White House.
Oh. Okay, only one political story this week because I'm unfortunately running out of time. I have got shit to do for work tomorrow, so I apologize, but I think you'll agree it's a good one. Michelle Bachmann advising Trump on foreign policy so God can save America from Islam. Former Minnesota Congresswoman has said a Hillary Clinton victory would lead to certain destruction for the United States. Here's a scary thought. Former Minnesota Tea Party Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, the wife of ex-gay therapist Marcus Bachmann, says she's now advising Donald Trump on foreign policy. Bachmann, who is already serving on the GOP nominee's Evangelical Advisory Board, broke the news outside a Trump rally in Minnesota on Friday night, where she called him a, quote, common sense guy, unquote, who's, quote, not into political correctness, unquote.
He also recognizes there is a threat around the world, not just here in Minnesota, of radical Islam,
Bachmann told NPR News.
I wish our President Obama also understood the threat of radical Islam and took it seriously.
Bachmann's fucking crazy. Not just because of that, but, she's married to a guy who is an ex-gay therapist who has incredible fashion sense. When she was running back in 2012, he was late to an event because he was out shopping for sunglasses for the dog. Yeah, and, she says he picks out all her clothes. And if you've seen the way Michelle speaks, that she's got the old crazy eyes. She gave that Republican response to one of Obama's State of the Union addresses, and she kept looking up and to one side of the camera rather than directly in it like everybody else does when they give a rebuttal speech. I'd say she's about as crazy as Sarah Palin, so if that gives you any ideas, and she's now advising Donald Trump on foreign policy. A woman whose husband makes his living traumatizing homosexuals. Yeah. What a great time we're in. I'm so scared. Okay, and I am afraid I gotta wrap this up early. I apologize for the shortness of it and the lack of content, but, I think you can understand with what happened to me why it's like that. Hopefully, America will be on next week's episode. She was supposed to have a segment for this week's episode, but she's had some computer problems and wasn't able to do it. So, if all goes well, she'll be on, and I'm sure we'll have a good time, because I don't think she's read the Apocrypha, which will be the subject of next week's episode. And in any case, next week's episode will certainly be better than this one. I thank you all for listening.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.